let me know whenever you're ready.
Yes, ma'am. We're starting. Education is the passport to the future, but tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. For every budding student eager to prepare themselves for tomorrow, we present to you DAKSH 2022. Members of the audience, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. Christ University is proud to welcome you all to this edition of DAKSH, the annual flagship event of the university. I am Shmriti Pradhan. I'll be your MC for the day. DAKSH, the annual education and career guidance fair hosted by the Student Council of Christ University, is a one-stop destination for all things education. At DAKSH, you get to witness exclusive opportunities, imperative student guidance, acquire varied knowledge, and make informed choices regarding your education and your careers. Without any further ado, we present to you today's session, Goya Media, Entrepreneurship, Media, and Food Publication. We are beyond honored to have amidst us Ms. Anisha Oomen, our esteemed speaker for today. With a background in media and online publication, Ms. Anisha is a co-founder and director of Goya Media, a house that specializes in digital content and communications for the brands in the food and beverage and hospitality sectors. She also worked at the Yahoo India as a content producer. She was also a contributing features writer at the Food Lovers magazine. She's also been involved with hosting the Food Lovers show, a culinary experience showcasing the depth and range of food culture in India. She also worked as a key client manager at AP Moller Morris Desk Group. She received her Bachelor's of Arts degree from Christ University, Bangalore in Economics, Psychology, and Sociology. I'd like to give this time to Gayatri.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. I want to say, first of all, that it is such an honor to be here at my alma mater and be speaking at Christ College, because I remember when I chose to do arts in Christ College, it was, I graduated top of my school and everyone sort of raised their eyebrow at me saying, you're going to do arts? I mean, surely you got into another course. Why are you choosing to do arts? And arts was something that I loved. It's something that I was passionate about. It's where I've always been interested in. And I made that choice, but I always felt like I was looking over my shoulder and I was afraid of being a failure. And I was also afraid that I was disappointing a lot of people who expected me to be a big success. So when I graduated from college, I got a job at a very non-art line kind of stream. It was in shipping and logistics, and it was a very safe choice to make. And I took it. I said, yes, let me do it. I joined a management training program. It seemed very glamorous at the time. They promised me that I would go to Copenhagen every 6 months, which I did, which was very exciting. And I spent about 4 years there before I realized that this is not what I wanted to do. And I remember back in school, I had one of those aptitude tests. I had done an aptitude test, and it said that Anisha would be great as a journalist. And my grandmother looked at it and she said, journalism? You can never do journalism. There's no money in that. And so, of course, I didn't. I took the safe option. I went with a shipping and logistics company. I did a management training course. And then I just took the whole long way round, and I came back to where my heart was in the beginning, which is in the art space, which is being a journalist, being a writer, going out in the real world, meeting people and recording their stories. And I feel like, you can choose to take the long way around, or you can follow your heart and trust your instincts. And I think when I look at the world around me and all the people doing exciting things, I just want to tell you that they are not all startup bros from the business world. In fact, some of the people who are doing the most exciting things in the startup space are people who are artists, who are writers, who are creative people in fashion and design. And those are the people who are leading the change and leading the conversations in spaces, in every space. So I want to encourage you, if any of you are in the art space and you're feeling like you've let people down, or this is the choice that is not the most premium, let me tell you that that is not true. There is so much exciting world to conquer for you if you're from the art space. So don't hold yourself back. Um, okay, so with that, let me tell you a little bit about my organization. My partner Aisha and I run a food media company called Goya. Goya is a food and culture publication. In the last 6 years, we've worked with more than 500 writers, artists, photographers, and we've worked to document the culinary culture in India. And over the years, as the publication has become more successful and has become more well recognized in the space, we sort of expanded to build out a media arm. And there we host podcasts, we curate events, we consult in the F&B space. But our first and our dearest production remains the Goya Journal, a publication on food and culture. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being a writer and working in the publication space and working specifically with food before I went to talk to you about the entrepreneurial aspect of things. One question we get asked a lot is, why did you pick food? What is it is food? Does it have the depth that it requires entire publication in itself? And very often as food writers, Aisha and I were not taken very seriously. Most food writers, when we started, were not taken seriously. And people just thought, oh, you're going to restaurants and eating a lot of food. That sounds like a great career. But what we wanted to do and what we wanted to build with Goya is for people to realize that food is a way of understanding the world. It's a lens to understanding the world and to understanding many aspects of the world, whether it's politics, economics, caste, questions of culture and identity, questions of history. And what we found as we don't just write on the journal, we have writers from all over the country, all over South Asia, in fact, that write for us. And what we have seen is that food is a barometer for understanding everything that happens in the world right now. The price of grain and flour is so important for the stability of economies and society. And it's a slight shift in that can cause tectonic shifts in the world, ripple effects, right? The biggest conversations in the world right now, if you think about what's happening in the country, are questions of caste, questions of gender, questions of power and class struggles. And all of those things can be understood through the lens of food. And when you think about in caste, it's a question of who is eating what and who is not allowed to eat what, who has access to certain types of food and who doesn't have access. That defines power and class. And when it comes to gender, who are the guardians and the gatekeepers of food and recipes and culinary heritage in our country? But who is the face of it? Who cooks at home and who cooks in the restaurants? Who are the people being awarded, who are being awarded and recognized on all these public platforms, who are being celebrated for their contributions to food? But who are the silent gatekeepers of those recipes at home? All of those questions and all of those struggles can be understood through the lens of food. I want to share a few examples before we go a little further, because what we wanted to do when we started Goya was to question the things that we take for granted, identities of history, questions of history, questions of identity, questions of authenticity. These are things that we take for granted. Did we always eat tomatoes? Right from Punjab and UP to Kerala, every community, every cuisine has tomatoes as such an integral part of their food. But tomatoes are only a few hundred years old, and India's culture goes back thousands of years. So that is something fundamental that we assume that we know. Also, questions of practitioners of Hinduism. Were they always vegetarian? Was there a time that maybe could it be that Brahmins ate beef, in fact? And this is such a contentious subject. It's the reason at the root of most of the violence, religious violence in our country today. And if the answers to these questions are not what we think we know, then that leads us to questioning a lot of things we believe and take for granted. Am I right? Is being vegan really better for the planet? Can we take the concept of veganism from the West and just copy paste it into India? And can we claim the higher moral ground? What we believed, Aisha and I, my partner and I, what we believed at Goya is that food has the ability to be a bridge in polarizing times. And the times that we live in now, people are more divided than they've been in a long, long time. And we believe that food and food journalism can really be an agent of change. Some of the stories that we have commissioned have surprised us. That's the amazing thing about working as an editor. Even though you're not actively on the ground, the stories that come in, they surprise us. We're constantly learning. And more than that, we are constantly moved at how powerful an agent of change food is. If you remember in 2019, during the CAA protests in Shaheen Bagh, we sent one of our reporters. Her name is Shalom Gauri, and she was in Delhi to do a story on the community kitchen that was feeding the protests there. But when she got there, she called us in a panic because she said, there are no kitchens here. Yet Shaheen Bagh and the protesters at Shaheen Bagh never ran out of food. Supplies were pouring in from neighborhoods all over Delhi. And there was no organization or nonprofit or even a unified collection point or a leader to these, coordinating these collections. But food came in the truckloads. And it was stored, it was distributed efficiently, seamlessly, with no leaders in a country that, we can't even form a queue without someone sort of huddling us into space. And what we realized is that a community had sprung together to provide sustenance to the people representing them in their protests and their cause. And all of that happened organically. And the only way that people who were not at the protest could show that they were there and say that, hey, you are representing the rest of us, is by sending food. Another thing that food is really powerful is, another way that food is really powerful is that it can be a symbol to represent dissent, solidarity, and resistance. And these are powerful things. These are powerful pillars of in a democracy. To feed one person and to share a meal with someone is an act of social intimacy. And in cultures like India, we understand that it connects, it creates bonds, it creates affinities, and it creates obligation. Because we realize that the hand that feeds us, we're indebted to that hand, right? And if you remember the recent farmer protests in Haryana and Delhi on the borders, if the farmers fed the police that were lathi charging them, that were, throwing tear gas and shelling them, and they invoked the same cultural wisdom that food can be a symbol that represents all of these things, while it's also the simple act of feeding someone. And conversely, when the farmers refused the food offered by the government at the meetings, the peacekeeping meetings, what they were saying is that they refused to be indebted to the people who oppress them. And in this way, they understood that you're building solidarity, not just by the act of feeding and by being fed, but by circulating visuals of this kind of allyship, And food has become a symbol of something much, much bigger than itself. Another story that we really loved is how food is power. I know many of you would have studied the Green Revolution, and at the time India was going through massive malnutrition, and it was a young country in poverty, and the government introduced these high yield variety of seeds in the hope of eradicating poverty and hunger. But what it did was that it took the power out of the hands of small farmers. And Aisha and I were doing a story in rural Andhra Pradesh. In fact, we were visiting another alumnus of Christ College, Molly, whose family runs an organization called Timbuktu. And what we saw there was in every house, built into every house, were these 6 to 8 foot giant pottery terracotta pots that were just built into the walls. And it was a method of traditional seed storage, because people, and especially farmers, understood that the way to ensure food security and sovereignty outside of the government means saving heirloom varieties of seeds, right? So access to food and access to the seed is a way to retain power, because when the government distributed these so-called high-yield seed varieties, they led to, one, monocrops. Two, they were also susceptible to certain types of pests, and you only had one type of crop in your field and one variety of seed. And if you were attacked by this pest, your entire crop was wiped out and you lost everything. But if a farmer has the ability to, grow a crop of okra, enjoy it, share it with his neighbors, with his family, save some of the seed, the best, the hardiest, the most pest resilient, and save it for the following year, then he keeps the power of food and food sovereignty and food security within himself. So that, all of these stories that we found when we were out there is reinforced that food is a powerful agent of change. And food is at the intersectionalities of all of these subjects of power, of caste, of history, of the natural world, of understanding culture and identity. And we also do a lot of work in private kitchens, and home kitchens are constantly challenging the idea of caste and history, and of what is grown in certain regions and what does it mean to share and to not share your food. And some of our most beloved stories belong to a series called Thousand Kitchens. Thousand Kitchens is a series where Aisha and I go into home kitchens and we document heirloom recipes. When I say heirloom, I mean recipes that have been in families for more than 3 generations. And we watch as the person cooks the recipe for us. We talk to them about where they learned the recipe, the way the recipe has evolved over the years, the backstory to the family's, the backstory to the family's use of this recipe, in what cultural context and what festivals they use it. And what we found is that home kitchens challenge so many of the ideas and the narratives that we hear in larger media. And that was another factor in us hoping to, another factor in us choosing to work with home kitchens, because so much of the food that was being covered at the time was restaurant food. We were going to restaurants and we were covering, who's the new restaurant and who's the new chef and what's the kind of menu that he's working with. But what we felt was that India, as a country that is so diverse, and you throw a stone and you're in a different landscape, the language is different, the kind of ingredients and produce that's being grown are different, the techniques used in the kitchen are different. And real Indian food is being cooked in homes, and that is not present, or it's not really seen in restaurants. And there is so much breadth of diversity that is almost lost. And all of these recipes, the way we saw it was that it's intangible heritage. When you go to a museum, you see very tactile pieces of art or sculpture, books, and all of these things. When you can touch them and when you can see them like that, it's easier to wrap your head around the idea of preservation and preserving a piece of your history and heritage. But across India, most of the recipes are transmitted through oral knowledge. And oral history, because it's intangible and it's undocumented, is one, it's not valued, it's not being preserved, and two, it's disappearing. And it is such an integral part of our heritage, which is one of the reasons that we decided to focus on food. Let me see how we're doing on time there. Okay. Which brings me to the second part of what I want to tell you, which is running a media company. So I was asked to talk to you about media and entrepreneurship as well. And why did we choose to start a media company? So the media arm grew out of a necessity to sustain our passion, which is documenting and preserving all the recipes and preserving the journal as a magazine online. And we had writers and we had photographers and we had artists who were working for us from all over the country, and we needed to pay them. And that's how we built out the media arm as a business arm to sustain the journal. And in that sense, Goya forced us to evolve every year, from writers to business women. We had to learn to do things that we didn't know how to do, we didn't want to do, but the business forced us to do it. So we sort of had to grow into business women. We had to learn how to read balance sheets and learn how to pay our GST and how to read profit and loss sheets, and we had to take on any work we could do. So while the Goya Journal was the work that we wanted to do, to sustain that and to pay our writers, we had to take on a lot of work that we considered, we had been working for 10 years. We didn't see this as work that, to put it frankly, we thought, this kind of content work is really below us. But there's no such thing as any work below you when you are an entrepreneur, because you have to do whatever you have to do to pay the bills, right? And the skills that you need and the nature and scope of work in this space is sort of in opposition with each other, because you have the writer and you have the entrepreneur. And to be a writer, as all your literature teachers will tell you, and is that you need to read a lot, you need to write a lot, and you need to do a lot of bad writing and get all the bad writing out of the way before you start writing the good stuff. I would also say find someone that you can share your work with, someone who loves you enough to be honest with you, so you can get honest feedback, and they'll tell you when your work is crap. But also, I want to tell you, as a writer, don't just sit at your computer. Life is out there. And if you want to be a good writer, you have to live and you have to be part of all the things that are happening out there. So get out there, get your story in the real world. And that means that you have to have a whole lot of skills outside of great language and great writing. You have to have people skills. You have to be able to listen. You have to be able to build a connection with somebody, and you have to be able to get them to trust you. And you have to listen to the things they're saying to you, but also the things that they're not saying, because those are the questions you want to ask. And very often that's where the real story is, the things they're not saying. It's also about being in the right place at the right time. You have to have a whole lot of skills. You have to understand social media today to be a successful writer. You have to be able to promote yourself and promote your work. And in India, and with the culture that we have, we don't learn to do that. We don't learn to market ourselves. We learn to be modest and sort of not, because it's considered tooting your own horn, and we're taught to be humble, right? But I think there's so much work out there, and there's so much exciting things out there. You have to be allowed to be heard. So that's things that we had to learn to be good at. You also have to be able to, find a story, how to spin a story, how to sift through information in a quick way to understand trends, see the story potential in something when you're present, or when you're seeing something unfold in front of you. And, do uncomfortable things like go on an auto or a bus or a train and travel long distances and be in places where you don't understand the language. And writing is all of those things. So to be a writer, to be a successful writer, you have to be able to do all of those things. As an entrepreneur, I think one of the hardest things after having the job that I did after college is you have to prepare to be broke. You as the entrepreneur or as the founder will always be paid the last. You have to pay everybody else, and you'll have to do all the unglamorous grunt work, and then maybe if you have anything left over, you can take some money home. But to work, I'd say one of the things that really helped me was working in a larger company before I started my own business, because that taught me to do, awful grunt work. And when we graduate from college, we've been in college for 3 years or 5 years, and everybody knows us. We're big fish in a small pond, and no one's going to make you do the running around that you did in first year. But when you join work, you're back at the bottom of the pile again, and you're going to have to do all the unglamorous grunt work that nobody else wants to do. But the thing is, doing that work, I remember I spent a whole year taking bookings for a logistics company, and it was the most mind-numbing work, because I had to just copy paste. I used like 0% of my brain cells, and I used maybe 3 fingers. That's it. So, and I was on the verge of quitting every week. But what it taught me was to build resilience. It taught me to build humility. And it taught me that if you want to go to the top, you have to learn every task at the bottom. And building that resilience and doing things that you don't want to do helps you find your true north. It helps you sort of narrow in on the things that really are your passion, if you're not sure about it, like I wasn't. And I had to do things like drop invoices and do client-facing work. I can't recommend client-facing work enough, because as artists or as writers, I think we tend to be in our own bubble, and we don't want to meet clients, and we don't learn how to sell. And very often these are not terms that are considered. Well, nobody thinks that an artist can market themselves. But I think that if you want to survive as an entrepreneur and you want to build a business, then you have to learn how to sell, how to build a thick skin, and how to deal with a lot of rejection, how to take, someone told me you have to be able to eat rejection for breakfast. And I graduated from the top of my class. I was good at a lot of things, And I did not know how to deal with rejection. And so that was something that I had to learn from scratch. And all of these things are things you have to be really good at if you want to have the resilience to survive in a business space, because you're going to be rejected a lot. What else? I'd say learn to take risks. I don't know if I think that is something that you can do in college. I think that you can learn to take risks and make mistakes. I think if you get a chance to intern, I interned every summer holidays in college, and I feel like that taught me so much about what the workspace was like and what was valued, and what skills I needed and what kind of attitude I needed more than anything else. Um, and if you learn how to fail and how to take risks and make mistakes, I think you that is a huge asset in your arsenal. um, I'd say also, do things outside your comfort zone, and you can train for that. Build an appetite for the long struggle. One of the things, especially in the startup world right now, is that people want to run a business or start a business and sell it in 5 years, and they're out. They make like $1 million, they buy themselves a fancy car, and that's it. And they're on to the next thing, of course. But I don't see myself, and neither does Aisha. We don't see ourselves as serial entrepreneurs in that way. What we wanted was to build a business, that uh, that will last, that has value, that creates value, that has a legacy, and that means playing a long game. And long game, and being able to play the long game means that you have to have patience, and you have to have appetite for a long struggle. You have to put your head down and stay the course and just do the work. And I would say, if you can, learn to ask for help. That is something that we learned later on. We learned to ask for help, to build a support system and be able to lean on that with other entrepreneurs. Because unlike working in an office, which can be like having a classroom with friends around you, there's a ready-made support system or a network that you can plug into. Being an entrepreneur can be really lonely. So if you have a network to support yourself, and to learn from, that's invaluable, because some of the best advice we got was from other women entrepreneurs, and there's no replacement for that. Another thing I would say is to trust. As your business grows, you have to hire people that are smarter than you, and your business is going to outgrow the skills that you have. At one point, we built the Instagram account, Goya's Instagram account, from scratch. We brought it to 20,000 followers all by ourselves. But after a point, we needed skills that Aisha and I didn't have. We needed marketing and business support strategy, that are skills that Aisha and I don't have. And the skills that the business needs from us they are far heavier than anything that we can offer. So we have to trust other people to join us, and trust that we have to and let go of the control of the business ourselves, and learn to trust other people and hire other people, and hire other people who are smarter than you. I feel like that was really important advice that I got. I know one of the questions, or one of the tenets of this talk, was to talk about whether this is a sustainable business. I would say that writing is not really a sustainable job. It's one of the hardest jobs out there. Yet, why are so many people writers? It's because we are compelled to do it. We believe, and specifically with Goya, we believe that there's value in food writing. And, there's politics in food, and there's society is in food, and history is in food. And if that's your true north and that's who you are, I think it will lead you back to where your heart is. If you want to be a writer, some take a longer route than others, and some have courage right at the start and they're able to take that plunge. But I would say, if you are able to do it, do it. And in terms of whether Goya is successful, we thought that in 5 years, we would be able to see, we would be able to know whether we were successful or not. And we're just about to complete year 6. And I feel that we've come to a point where we've built out a product that people really believe in, that has built its space in the market. And anybody in food and in the food business understands and knows Goya. And I think that the second leg of our journey is just about to begin. We're on the cusp of learning about how to build a successful business around it. We've been able to cultivate an audience for that. when no one believed that there was scope for this sort of journalism, and there was no space here, that what we were doing was too niche, that there wouldn't be a market. And um, the thing is, when you're the first in a space and you're building out the market there, and you're building out that category, it's going to be much harder for you than for people who come after you. I believe they call it pioneer tax, which means that the first one to do it will pay a tax that other people following them don't have to do. And that tax is that it's going to be so much harder to build out the category, to show value in what you're doing. And I would say probably ask me again in 5 years about whether this is a sustainable business. But we've been here so far, we've kept our heads above the water. And the thing is, if we had a chance to do it again, I don't think we would change a minute, because every second of this journey has been exciting, fulfilling, has challenged us in ways that we couldn't even imagine. And what we've done is, even in the short 6 years that we've been around, Goya has built so much goodwill in the community and has created value for so many people. And we hear that every day from our community, and there's nothing like it. So would I recommend that? Yes, I would. I wanted to tell you a little bit about where we failed. And I think I touched upon it a little bit. I feel like we didn't, as entrepreneurs and writers, we didn't take enough risks. We took a long time to hire our first person, and I wish we'd failed faster. That would be the advice I give young entrepreneurs or business people. Fail faster so that you can learn from your mistakes faster and pick yourself up and move on, because then your business moves forward and grows exponentially than if you stay safe and stay in the harbor. As they say, boats are not built to stay in the harbor. They're meant to go out and be in rough waters and take on the storms. I think it's important also to be abreast of conversations on in pop culture, in the real world. Be abreast of those conversations, acknowledge when you mess up, and make real connections. Running a business is about making connections. We're great at it with the journal, with our writers. We're learning to do it with clients and with other people in the business space. Those are things that we failed at, and I feel like we're learning from those mistakes now, and we're rectifying now. And maybe if we failed at that sooner, we'd be growing a lot faster. What else did I want to touch upon? I wanted to also say that, coming back to where I started, where a lot of people looked at me with skepticism and looked at me as if taking arts or studying arts was a sign of failure. I want to tell you that you're going to meet a lot of people who will not believe in you and not understand what you're doing. In the beginning, when we started Goya, my family couldn't explain to their friends what we were doing. So my dad would say, "Oh, she's doing something with food and it's online. I don't really understand it." And of course, now he is our biggest supporter, so I have to say that. But you're going to meet a lot of people who don't understand what you're doing, who have a lot of things to say. A lot of people told us, "Oh, two creative people can't really run a business." And, "Oh, this is a new field. You know nothing about business. We don't come from a business family. What are you going to do? What kind of impact are you going to have?" But I want to say, don't listen to them. If you have a passion and you have a vision, I'd say follow it. Okay, let me rephrase that. I'm not going to say don't listen to them. I would say listen to them, think about it. Because, as women especially, we're taught to think, we're taught to think about any sort of criticism that comes our way. And we're taught to sort of introspect and see if there's truth in it. So I would say listen, think about if there's truth in it. Can you learn from whatever they're saying? And if you feel like there isn't, criticism always must be constructive. And if there's something you can use from it, use it to drive you, use it to build you. I remember recently someone told us, "Oh, they knew how to make money, they would already be doing it." And those are things that we could let drag us down, or those are things that we could use to drive us. And I think you're going to have to build a thick skin and let that propel you, because we see And also be smart, be ready to pivot, look at what the world around you is doing. Learn as much as you can. Someone told me, smart people don't just learn from their own mistakes, they learn from other people's mistakes. And as writers, you have access into the minds of the best people in every field, because that's what their books are about, right? So learn from everybody and absorb like a sponge. Um, Goya was born on a whim as just a simple story on Squarespace, but we asked for help, we learned from people. People have shared so much wisdom with us, and we've used that, and we've also tried to be the change that we want to see, because we want to be able to pass that on to people, to other people who come to us for help. And so I would say, follow that. Don't listen to the naysayers. And yeah, I would say be the change that you want to see, because so much of the industry is going to be secretive and not want to share things with you. But when I think about the women that did share information with us, they changed everything for us. That was a game changer. We changed the course of our business, we changed our business models, and we have grown in leaps and bounds. So now when people come to us to ask for help, we're able to offer that as well. We understand that all boats rise with the tide, and there is space for competition, but there's also a lot of space for support and carrying people with us. Which brings me to the end of what I have to say. I'm open for questions. If anyone has anything that they'd like to ask, please just go ahead.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for an eye-opening session. I'm sure we had immense takeaways and infinite learnings for today. Audience, please note that now we're open for questions for our esteemed speaker, Ms. Oomen. May I please ask the volunteers to ask their questions? Ma'am, there's a question for you. Could you please explain the sudden rise in the popularity of food bloggers and what it means to the media industry?
I think food blogging has been on the rise for about maybe the last decade or so. I think with Instagram, and it's not just blogging on Squarespace or any of the other blogging sites, but it's also microblogging on Instagram. Instagram and TikTok have changed the way that you're able to talk about food, the way that you're able to document it. And I think it's part of a lot of movements coming together. Chefs in many ways are the new rock stars and the biggest celebrities, and they've changed the stigma that came with wanting to move into hospitality, because now it's a glamorous business. And I think in that way, food blogging is a result of that shift in the way that society perceives the industry. And I think it's a great thing. I think the more food we have out there, the more of our intangible heritage is being documented, this oral history is being recorded. And I think it's also great because people have their own platforms and they don't have to depend on newspapers and magazines to put their recipes and their history out there. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We have another question for you. Do you think food can be used as a medium of peace in today's tumultuous times?
I think definitely. I mean, just even, at the farmer protests, when there was so much, the whole country was divided, yet the farmers were feeding the Delhi police that were attacking them, that was so brutal, that were, hosing them with those water pipes in the bitter cold of a Delhi winter. I think there's so much to learn there. And I think India, despite its diversity and, every culture being so different, the one thing that we see across the board is that however small a household or however poor someone is, when you visit them, they will offer you food, they will share whatever they have with you. And at that point, it's about setting aside your differences, and you never say no to what's offered to you. I think there's that inherent understanding in our culture, and I think it's a very powerful tool that is perhaps not being used enough.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another question for you. As the media industry is becoming increasingly focused on TRPs and ratings, what are your views on the ethics of this industry?
Oh, that is a great question. That is that is a subject that Aisha and I have very passionate and passionate debates on. The thing is, right from when I was at Yahoo, working on the editorial team there, it was always seen as the editorial team versus the marketing team, and they were always at odds with each other. And at Goya, we wanted to be able to. We know that if we want to run the media house, we have to be able to partner with businesses in the food space and to be able to tell their stories in ways that reach our audience. So one is the question of advertising. How do you advertise ethically? How do you partner with brands and take money to tell stories and be transparent with your audience? I think a large way to succeed at that is to trust your audience, because we keep Goya free. Goya is not behind a paywall. We're not asking for subscription fees. And so we have to trust that our audience knows that in order to sustain that, we have to work with brands, and there's a source that, there's a price being paid somewhere. And Goya has always focused on storytelling and deep storytelling, immersive storytelling. And compared to a lot of brands out there, our following is quite small. But the people who follow us on Goya are the biggest influencers and movers and shakers in the food space. And this is not just in India. We have some of the biggest chefs and the biggest, the most well-known cookbook authors and writers all over the country following Goya, which means that there is value in this kind of storytelling. And very often brands will come to us and be like, oh, how many followers do you have, and how many people are going to view this, and what is your reach, and what is your engagement? And it took us a while to build up the courage and have the conviction of knowing that Goya has a small audience, but our audience is deeply engaged. So you can go wide or you can go deep. And Goya chose to go deep with our audience, with our storytelling, with our industry. And in the beginning, a lot of brands and a lot of clients would say, no, I don't think so. We want people with 100x followers. But now more and more, we are seeing people come to us because they want their story told meaningfully. They understand the value in good journalism. They understand the value in building an audience that trusts you, that kind of credibility. And, I never thought I'd be saying this, but I do see the tide changing. And especially with WhatsApp and so much misinformation being spread, I feel like the value of journalism is being lost. But I have been forced to reconsider that. And I really believe that things are changing.
I have one last question for you. Sustainable is the need of the hour. Is sustainable eating truly sustainable?
I think so. I think that's a choice we make every day. I mean, there are people I know who want to make pizza sauce with tomatoes imported from Italy, and farmers in India are just throwing out entire harvests of tomato because they're not able to get a price for it, and it's just cheaper to dump it than to sell it and take it to the markets. I think that it's a choice that we have to be mindful of. I think we have to constantly question. I don't think we can ever be complacent about that. And I think, there's a story on veganism on the Goya Journal, and it's one of the stories we get trolled the most about. Even today, I think it's like a 4-year-old story, but every week without fail, we get a hate comment on the story. Because what the authors of that piece said was that being vegan is not a sustainable option in India. And that's a bit of a blanket statement. But you have to look at everything in context. Can you just switch to soy milk because cow milk comes from animals and it's not sustainable? You have to look at what soy is doing all over the world. They're cutting down tracts of Amazon rainforest to grow soy monocultures. Is that sustainable? I mean, those are questions we need to ask instead of just buying the propaganda that's being peddled. So I think it requires a critical mind, a questioning mind, and I think that's what college is meant to teach us. So let's use our education, that in constructive ways.
With that, we have come to the end of today's event. We thank our speaker immensely for enlightening the path to broaden our knowledge. Thank you to all the faculty members, members of the management, student council members, and volunteers for being the backbone behind the smooth run of the event. Thank you all for being a wonderful event. Audience, have a lovely day.
Thank you so much.